I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're diving into Leaving the Mormon Church with Peace. How did you do that? It's written by a terrific author. Her name is Dr. Darlene Taylor. This deeply personal book shares the doctor's transformative spiritual experience that led her to leave the Mormon Church, embrace a direct connection with her higher power, and confront a stage 4 cancer diagnosis with newfound clarity. It's a compelling story of faith, love, and the courage to follow your own spiritual path. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight. We thank the team at Atticus Publishing for helping us put her in the spotlight today. And we ask viewers like you to support authors like her by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing her amazing book. The links are below this interview. Doctor, thank you so much for being our guest today here on Spotlight.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate that.
It's our pleasure. This is a very profound, insightful book. As I said before we started recording, it's a story of courage and resilience. What was a spiritual encounter that led you to leave the Mormon Church?
So it's actually, so I was teaching a gospel doctrine class. I was preparing for a class. And then I stood up to go into the other room for some reason. And then I had this spiritual encounter. And the spiritual encounter, and I'll cry every time I relive it. So if I talk about it from here, I can talk about it. But as soon as I get into it, you're going to lose me, and I got Kleenex. But this is in 2014. And then I had this spiritual encounter. And when I came back to the real world, I saw things differently, instantaneously. So I didn't take years to leave the Mormon Church like most people that fight through a lot of inner struggles. It was just in one heartbeat, where, say, you're looking at a piece of paper and it's a rectangle, but if you turn it sideways, it's a line. And so now I see the world differently, but it's the same thing I'm looking at and I've always looked at. I just see things differently. And that was so intense in my life that it's led my life since then, with every question I've ever had, and answers every single question I have about spirituality when I
So you had a
reflect.
complete paradigm shift that
Yeah.
day in that encounter that changed your perspective on faith, your perspective on spirituality. Is it difficult to leave the Mormon Church? Are there pressures on you to stay within the church? Tell us a little bit about that struggle or what that process is like.
For most people, it's very, very, very difficult to leave any church of your youth. And I've written the book specifically for the Mormon Church. It's very difficult. There's a lot of judgment. There's a lot of fear with those that are in the church, saying don't leave, because there's a belief that if you don't adhere to the different principles, that you won't be with your family forever, and you won't see God in the next life, or you won't live with him or be with him. So there's a lot of fear that keeps people in, but there's a lot of great, great, great things about the Mormon Church that keep you in, with the social aspects of the church. There's just a lot of good pressure in a way, and the brotherhood and the sisterhood, and really joining that community. And so the only pressure I feel today is I miss the society, I miss the social, and that's something that, fast forward, when you leave the church and you're congruent about it, that you kind of miss. But up until that point, there's just a lot of pain, discrimination, and fear that individuals encounter from leaving the church. It's really, 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 really hard to do. So sometimes I don't even want to share my story, because then I know they're in for this huge trek. And it's going to be hard when mine was easy. But I figured out how to make yours easy. If someone has a question about leaving the Mormon Church, I have figured out through my experience how to share with you how to do it nearly pain-free, with living a principle-based life. And I can elaborate more on that if you'd like me to.
Just say, give us like one or two hints for the folks out there who are in the Mormon Church and might be deciding that they want to leave, or in any religious institution and feel pressure to stay in, and would like to say, I don't want to be a part of this officially anymore.
So there's 4 reasons people leave the church, and I wish I had it in front of my face so I could make sure I hit them all. But the first one is kind of a rebellion, like you, screw you, F the world, I'm going to do my own thing. And they're mad and they hate their dad for forcing them. So that's number one. Number two is people just are lazy, like, yeah, I believe it, but yeah, I'll go back one day. It's kind of cold outside, I'm going to stay home. So that's the second group. They're not sure. They don't know. They're kind of lazy. The third one is they just don't believe it. Like, no, 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 that cannot be. Whether it's from all the financial situations, which by the way, I do not talk about in my book, but there's a lot of financial questions. There's historical questions that people can ask. But there's the story of Joseph Smith. There are the different principles that are skewed a little bit in the church. So people sometimes just don't believe the story. And that's the fourth one. And then, or the third one. And then the fourth one is the hippie kind of movement. And I say that with respect, like, I want to find my inner power. And they kind of leave everything. They're meditating, but then they kind of turn into a church again, like saying, did you say your prayers today? Did you do your yoga? Did you eat yogurt? And so they're kind of, they're kind of lost. And my son is in this group. Well, he was in this group, and he reports to me about how hard that is, and just kind of floating to try to find myself and let church not bug me. And then the last one is what I feel I did, where you become directly communing with God. You don't need all this in the middle, literally don't need it. Most people do. Most people do need the school, the Sunday school. But sometimes people get really edified when they see this new angle of life, and religion holds them back. So there are those 4 or 5 distinct areas where people leave the church for different reasons.
Very, very insightful, very, very interesting, and very, very true, no doubt, from my experience as well in a Christian church. Let me ask you about your health struggles that you endured during this time as well. That must have been a complicating factor to be sick at that time. And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in 2014 is when I had this experience and left the church like that.
Hmm.
3 years ago, which would be 2021, I had just gotten married. It's such a sad story. 6 weeks after I got married, I got diagnosed with stage 4 neuroendocrine carcinoma. And I was sick from that day forward to this day now. So I'm having to take certain meds and do certain things to even be here on the call. So that was interesting. And how this has to do with my book is usually when we go through a trial, especially when you know you're going to die. Everyone's going to die, but you know you're going to die pretty soon-ish, you're not going to live 30 years, maybe, probably not 20, maybe 3, maybe 4. And so when you think about that, wow, do you need to understand God now? And so this really just called me on my stuff to say, girlfriend, do you believe what you really believe, or do you need to run back to church so you can be with your family forever and sealed in the temple? And literally 200% congruence. No, I do not. And 200% congruence. I love what I believe. I believe what I believe. It's simple. It's who I am. It's what I believe, and it's embedded in me, and I have no question. And if I was to die tomorrow, I would have no regrets. I'm anxious actually to do that. I might have a couple years, I don't know. And I'm actually anxious to be on the other side, not anxious to leave my kids and grandkids and want to walk or watch them walk down the aisle. So that's just really sad. So this experience with the church almost has nothing to do with my diagnosis, except it makes me even more sure of my decisions.
Very, very interesting. You look healthy, by the way, so hopefully you're doing better than you might even expect. And
Yeah,
hopefully you're around a long, long time for your children, grandchildren, and so on, and all the
thank you.
events. So we'll keep you in our prayers for that, no doubt.
Thank you.
How did your spiritual journey, or really a spiritual evolution, impact your relationship with family and friends?
It freaked out my mother. It freaked out my sister, who's very, 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 very active. My dad had just passed, and my mom was questioning, well, do you believe in Satan? And, well, what, she was worried about me. And she was very kind and not judgmental. And I have a coming out story. Should I share that? It's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am fully in the church, like fully. Like I'm teaching gospel doctrine, which is a class you don't teach unless you're fully in the church. So it was Thanksgiving. My lovely sister had passed away a few months before. So we were gathering for Thanksgiving without my sister, and we were gathering at a restaurant. Well, I'm not in the church now, but no one knows it. I had that experience in the silence of my mind, and I didn't tell anybody. But then I just wanted to live my life, which the evidence is if you don't wear garments, then everyone can see. And if you drink wine, then everyone can see. And if it's just like, she's drinking beer or wine. It's just like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. So I knew that that would happen when I told people I wasn't in the church. So at Thanksgiving, I'm kind of a risk taker and kind of edgy. I thought, well, I want wine with dinner, but I don't want to cause a scene. So I got up and I went to the waitress and I said, excuse me, I'm not in the church anymore. You know what I mean? And she goes, oh, yeah, yeah, because we're in Salt Lake City. So she knew what I meant. I says, can you get me just a little apple? It'll look like apple juice, but can you get me some white wine so I can have white wine for dinner? And so she brought that, it looked like apple juice. And so we had a lovely dinner. Everyone there was active except my brother, who I had told, so I told him, and we're like across the table.
Amazing.
Well, 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 I'm sitting next to my sister who passed, next to her husband, and he was a bishop. So he's paying for everybody today. He gets the bill, he's looking it over, and all of a sudden he goes, who got the wine? Who got the wine?
That's so funny.
As loud as he could, and I'm like, because it was on the bill.
That's so
And my
funny.
brother goes, Darlene, mess up. I go, but, you know, so and so, my wine is better for me than your 4 Dr. Peppers you just had that I watched you
That's
guzzle.
true.
And guess what? No one said a word to me ever.
Hmm.
Not
Amazing.
one word. Yeah. And then from then on, I'm not in the church, but I love God more.
Yeah.
How do you argue with that one? How do
You,
they
you
give me
can't.
any grief?
Every person's relationship with God is personal, whether you're a member of a church or not a member of a church, and it doesn't matter what that church is. And nobody can look into anybody's heart, nobody can look into anybody's soul and see what their faith is and what their connection is.
Right.
So I think actually, if you judge people who leave a church and judge people who choose to worship God in their own way, you're actually doing something that is very unchristian.
Exactly. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we
Amazing.
can see it from here,
Yeah.
but when you're in it, you don't see it. You think you're
Yeah.
just caring about them.
Amazing. I learned a lot today. I had no idea that the Mormon Church was that strict. You can't drink. You can't
Oh,
have to wear special clothes. I thought the Catholics were strict. You guys got
well,
us
it's
beat.
similar. It's similar, and coffee is the same as, killing small kitties.
Yeah. Well, I don't drink anymore and I don't drink coffee, so I guess I could become a Mormon if I
You
wanted
could
to.
you could
So
get baptized. I'll send the missionaries over
sounds
because
great.
that's what we're trained to do.
Awesome. Sounds great. The name of the book is Leaving the Mormon Church with Peace. How did you do that? It's written by Dr. I'm sorry, I'm going to pick this up. It's written by Dr. Darlene Taylor. It is a deeply personal book that shares the doctor's transformative spiritual experience that led her to leave the Mormon Church and embrace a direct connection with her higher power. It's an amazing book. As you can see, the doctor has a great personality, and that personality fills the pages of this book as well. Doctor, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really my pleasure to share some of what's contained inside of my book.
Well, a true pleasure speaking with you as well. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time until next time on Spotlight.